7 The Ticket.
I gotta do what I gotta do.
Jake Bogus and Nick Baugh.
Come on now.
This is The Drive.
Streaming online at theticketfm.com.
I ain't no joke.
Bryan Munson time, baby.
Yep.
Big Red Report, foxsports.com. Dr. Munson, how are you this afternoon?
I'm doing just fine. About yourself?
We're doing well, man.
Yeah.
We're doing well up north. What's the weather like in Texas?
Sitting about 65 degrees right now,
Okay.
and they're talking about it cooling off and raining again this weekend. So,
okay.
It's about that time of year, you know.
What's the vibe with Mac Brown?
You know, I think that there are those that are down here, particularly A&M fans and OU fans, that are laughing hysterically.
Yeah.
And then there are those that are true UT fans and bleed orange that have run out of excuses. I talk to a lot of them on a daily basis, and they are firm believers that he should have done more at Texas while he's been there at Texas. And if it weren't for a player named Vince Young, he may not have that national championship. So they're at a loss for words because they know they pull in the talent down there to Austin, and they don't know why it can't be funneled and put together like the pieces to a puzzle. I mean, this year, obviously, it's the defensive coordinator and not really knowing what he's got going on down there. But they're a talented team, and it's all about organization, and Diaz has not done a real good job doing it this year as a defensive coordinator.
Did you have any idea that Johnny Manziel would be this good right away?
No. I mean, he is, I write the Texas Hot 100, or did anyway, for Super Prep magazine. And he was on my list. I had meant to go back and grab that and figure out where I had him ranked at, but I'll guarantee you it was too low. But I've had a couple guys that, that I were kind of like my crown jewels that I had evaluated and put in my list, like Jacques Rogers. Nobody else had him. I had him on my list.
Nice.
And so I get some pride from that, but I guarantee you I'm going to blush when I see where I had Manziel last year.
Oh, wow. Bryan Munson is our guest. Big Red Report and foxsports.com. Hypothetical for you. You have two sons, Bryan?
I do.
All right. Let's just say you pick one of them. They're considering going to the University of Nebraska. They're a 3, 4, 5-star commit, you name it. Would you want your son to play for Bo Pelini?
Absolutely. And let me just preface this. Had you asked me that before this week, I might have told you that I was on the fence. I go back though and I listen to the comments of Will Compton, and I've known Will Compton for 5 years. And of course I haven't talked to him a lot since he's been up there in Nebraska, but I know what our conversations were like prior to. And the few conversations I've had with him after going up there to Nebraska, I can only tell you that guy doesn't know what tongue-in-cheek means. He will tell you exactly how he feels, and he's going to be 100% honest with you. And there's no reason for me to doubt any comment that Will Compton has to make to me about Bo Pelini. So if he's telling me that that's the captain of their team, and he would go to war for him, and he'll battle anybody for a stick of gum if Bo Pelini's giving him the pep talk. I'm gonna let my son follow in Will Compton's footsteps 100% of the time.
Why were you on the fence before that?
Well, I guess probably being a former defensive line guy. I'm not sure that the defensive line is set up there unless you're Ndamukong Suh to have a tremendous amount of success. I think you have to be not just a good player, but a great player on the defensive line to really stand out in the two-gap. Two-gapping, what you're doing is you're taking one for the team about 80% of the time. Yeah. You're taking up multiple blockers. You're grabbing up multiple gaps so the guys behind you at the second level can go ahead and make plays and make tackles. There are those Ndamukong Suh and Jared Crick that can go out there and excel in that scheme, and that says a lot about them as a player. But I've watched Cameron Meredith now for the last 2, 3, 4 weeks line up as a 3 technique and go out there, and it says a lot about him as a team player, guys, to know that he's basically going out there and just trying to occupy guys and not make plays. That's why I was so happy for him to get that safety or be credited with that safety on Saturday night.
Brian, given the way Nebraska plays, let's just go defensively because you're talking about defensive line and whatnot. Which position should they attract with the way they play in terms of their identity?
I think that in the secondary, especially at the safety spot, I think that they can be very appealing. I think if I were a safety guy and Nebraska puts on the film and showed me what DeJon Gomes and Eric Hagg had done, I think cornerback is another spot where I think that really it comes out and it shines. You show what Amakimura can do out back there.
Yeah.
But I think the spots that where they need the most help, where they I think they can still sell it, is at defensive tackle. And I think that they have some big key names and some guys that they can go out there and throw some names around because it's not a loose affiliation. I mean, Ndamukong Suh really put Nebraska back on the map. And I think Levante Davis, the outside linebacker spot, is a spot that Nebraska can say, with their funnel and their funneling technique, where they have the kind of spills right into them, that you can go out there and make a lot of tackles in that system right there.
Bryan Munson is our guest, Big Red Report. You can follow him on Twitter at Big Red Bryan, Bryan with a Y. Bryan, of course, there have been a couple things put out there about Bo Pelini maybe aspiring for a job in the SEC or Arkansas or Auburn, looking at him if they were to fire their head coaches. Even though we get on Bo sometimes for not getting as a lot of talent in Nebraska, the losses are a lot worse than how great the wins are. Is this surprising to you that year in and year out his name seems to come up with jobs?
No, not really. I think that I think Nebraska took a tremendous, for as much of a risk as it was somewhat of a calculated risk to bring a guy like Bo Pelini back into Nebraska. I think Tom Osborne wanted that face of a defensive coach, a guy who's going to concentrate and bring back that black shirt tradition. However, this was a first-time head coach hire for Bo Pelini. I mean, let's be honest. I mean, you got an interim gig against what was it? Did he play against Michigan State down the Alamo Bowl?
Yeah.
Is that right?
Yep.
So you have that as that one-time game to go back and look at, and I think that it was a little bit of a risk, and I think that there were some people that just wanted to see how he was going to kind of respond to that. I think also for Bo, people are seeing a guy that's learning as he's growing as a head coach. Obviously, based on the numbers and the guys they're trying to grab at the junior college positions this year, defensive tackle, defensive end, tight end, and you may even see him reach out and maybe try to find a guy at offensive tackle later on. This is a guy right here in Bo Pelini that's having to stopgap based on a pretty poor recruiting class, and I think that he's finally figuring out that whole picture, that cupboard eventually will go bare, that you can't go back there and you won't have a Hag and an Amakimura and Ndamukong Suh. Those guys aren't going to be waiting for you every time you just come out there in the field and just want to coach. You have to go find those guys. You have to recruit those guys. You have to convince them to come to Nebraska. He's done a much better job in becoming much more polished in the recruiting game, and I think that's one of the reasons why he's going to become a very popular name to throw around with head coaching vacancies. Plus, he's been in the SEC, guys. I mean, obviously, that's one of the things that he knows how to run an SEC-style defense, and I think that's going to make him very attractive to those teams.
But for the sake of the argument, I'll play devil's advocate. I mean, Bo Pelini has, hasn't won a conference championship. Really doesn't necessarily have a great bowl game record. You talk about how he's starting to understand the recruiting landscape, but to this point, he hasn't been a great recruiter. You say he could hang his hat on defense, but really the past 2 years, the defense has been somewhat average. Why is he so attractive, though, in terms of these other places wanting him?
Right, and I think that obviously that the defensive side, the past year or two in Nebraska, it lends itself to not having that talent level there, and that comes back to recruiting.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's an understanding of just the landscape of SEC football. I think if you have that under your belt, and you're going to have heads and shoulders on some guys that might be better on the surface, with more polished of a head coaching candidate, but because you have that experience, because you know what it takes to go into Death Valley, because you know what it's like to play there, what you can expect, you can prepare those guys. And what those guys are going to be facing on a week-in and week-out basis.
Bryan Munson, our guest, Big Red Report, and FoxSports.com on The Drive, 93.7 The Ticket, and theticketfm.com. Do you think any of these jobs are better than the Nebraska head coaching job? Tennessee, Arkansas, or Auburn?
No.
Why? Let's start with Tennessee. Tennessee is probably the most comparable, right?
Well, they're probably comparable, but I see those as being, despite Auburn winning a national championship 2 years ago now, I just see them as not being elite teams in that conference. I think that those are teams that are going to peak and they're going to valley, but the valley is going to be much wider than the peaks are going to be tall. I think that you're going to find, that Tennessee is going to be able to grab some athletes and they're going to be able to put together a team, but it's going to be so much more cyclical. And I think at Nebraska, you can come into a much more stable situation. And if you want to go ahead and say, well, yeah, but it's the SEC, and you want to go ahead and peak that one time is better in 7 years than being on top 5 out of 7 representing your division, and only winning the conference championship once, as opposed to competing for it once every 7 on the SEC. And I don't believe that at all.
Right.
I think that you're in a much more competitive situation, and I think you've got so much more going against you at those 3 programs than what you have in Nebraska. Now, I do realize, and I think that Bo Pelini now realizes too, it's pretty difficult to recruit to Nebraska, particularly those players that I think are going to be much more apt to come to play for you at Arkansas, at Tennessee, and at Auburn. But I think you just have to find the guys that want to come here, and you have to coach them up. There are definitely 4- and 5-star guys that are outside of the Sun Belt, that are in California, that are in the Big Ten footprint. And you have to get those guys to Lincoln, and you have to quit chasing the guys that are always going to stay in the SEC.
Yeah, I think one of the ways to look at it, Bryan, is to say that you could it's easier to get better players in the SEC. Yeah, I guess I'll give you that. But is it easier to win a conference title in the Big Ten? I think yes. Is it easier to go undefeated in the Big Ten? I think yes. And it's almost like, to me, it's similar to what maybe guys like Brad Stevens and Shaka Smart have figured out at the college basketball level is, you'd much rather be the top dog in a conference like that than go take a middle of the pack job somewhere else, and now you're just struggling to keep your head above water.
Do I want to go be the guy that wins the automatic berth in the Colonial, or do I want to go battle it out in the Big East?
Yep, exactly.
I mean that to me is kind of what I was trying to say. You said it much more eloquently than I did. I think the Nebraska job and the position that they have in the Big Ten kind of speaks for itself. I think that they can go out there and they can compete for a Big Ten championship every single year. And I think if you're at Tennessee or if you're at Auburn or if you're at Arkansas, you're talking about 1 out of 4, 1 out of 5, 1 out of 7 years. And it may come on the heels of you getting a guy like Cam Newton or a Ryan Mallett, somebody to transfer in to be there for a short amount of time and kind of ride the coattails.
Right.
And I don't know what kind of success that really brings. I think that there's a lot of disjointedness when you have those short-term guys that come in. I mean, obviously, you look at where Wisconsin was at last year and where they are this year. I know they're still battling there and they could win the Big Ten Conference, but they're definitely not the same team that they were. So I definitely agree with that. I think that, like I said, I think Bo has grown up and is understanding more what it takes to get guys to come to Nebraska. I think they're still trying to feel it out where they can be successful and where Nebraska's reach, how far the reach can extend. But I think that extension finishes about the Mississippi River, and you had to stick around the Big Ten footprint and hit California, maybe dabble into Florida and hit Texas. But you can find some guys, but there's a lot of guys in that area going to stay in the SEC and play football against you.
How would you honor Tom Osborne in his last home game as athletic director for Nebraska?
How would I honor him?
Yeah.
I think it's one. I just got to watch or reading the new Big Red Report magazine, which is actually a complete tribute. And I saw your guys' advertisement there too. It was making me think about going on the air with you guys today. and I really like how Josh laid out his crowning achievements and the moments that are there that are kind of just like the feather in the cap, so to speak. The one Heisman Trophy winner, going for two, the national championship games, the key wins. And I think you've got to put that in one big video. And I think the one thing that the people of Nebraska and the fans of the Nebraska Cornhuskers have to take some pride and be happy about, he's going to ride off to the sunset. And he hopefully goes and enjoys the rest of his life and is completely happy with doing whatever it is he wants to do.
Another guy that Husker fans will say goodbye to on Saturday is Rex Burkhead, and we've been trying to talk about where maybe Rex Burkhead ranks in all-time Husker history in terms of running backs. Where would you put him, Brian?
Oh, wow.
Is he top 5, top 10, outside top 10?
I think he's a top 10 guy, but this is kind of like Bo Jackson's pro career. It's like a photo album that there's a lot of pages missing out of it. You wish you would have been able to see the whole thing. Couple, some key injuries. Foot injury his freshman year, the knee injury his senior year. Where that could have added up to and left in that, if he'd been completely healthy, I think he's a top 5 guy. But I'd still have him somewhere peaking outside the top 5, but not as low as 10. Trying to think of some names there that I'd throw in,
Like, is he better than Roy Halou?
I think I'd probably have him right after Roy Halou.
Okay.
I think Halou to me was a very underrated, undervalued running back in Nebraska.
I would agree with that. I think he goes down as maybe one of the most underrated players in Nebraska football history.
Absolutely. Very, very productive guy, very durable guy. A lot of people didn't give him enough credit for what he had to do with some pretty bad offenses, actually.
Yeah.
He had to put those teams on his back a lot of times. And probably one of the gutsiest performances was the game against Missouri, where Taylor goes down with the injury. And that was one of the best performances I've ever seen from a individual performance standpoint from a Nebraska Cornhusker.
Bryan Munson, Big Red Report. Check him out on Twitter at Big Red Bryan. Thanks
Good
so
talk,
much, man.
You bet, guys. Take care.
You bet.